Chapter 51. Cursed Doll. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 51. Cursed Doll. Chapter 51. Cursed Doll. The fierce-looking orc leader gave everyone full pressure. Apart from McCrae, everyone muttered in their hearts. Even if they went all out, facing a boss with such terrifying attributes, they would only be wiped out. Thinking to this point, everyone pretended that nothing had happened and looked at McCrae, who was still calm. In their eyes, it was simply a dream for McCrae to kill this boss. Looking at the scene again. The orc leader had already begun to move. The orc leader's movement speed was very fast. Even though McCrae had made his teammates use the speed scroll, it was still far lower than the orc's exaggerated speed attribute. Seeing that the fierce orc leader was about to lunge at McCrae, in a flash, McCrae took advantage of the opportunity to squat and dodge, barely dodging the attack of the orc leader. This scene was very dangerous. One careless move could result in death under the merciless spears of the orc lord. Before everyone could be shocked, the next attack of the orc leader boss had already begun. The orc leader crossed the spear and sneezed. A cruel and terrifying smile appeared on his face, and he said fiercely, "Poor human, hide. It's a good time to move your muscles so that you won't have to stuff your teeth later." "Feral charge!" the orc leader shouted. Instantly, its huge body was immediately covered by a red light, and it rushed towards the locked McCrae at an unbelievable speed. McCrae looked at the orc leader who was rushing over like an arrow that had escaped the bow. His eyes turned cold, and he calmly raised the beginner's scepter in his hand and aimed it at the charging orc leader. He shouted softly, "Holy Repel." With the release of McCrae's skill, a golden barrier with holy light immediately appeared in front of the orc leader who was charging at full speed. Bang! After a muffled sound, the orc leader was directly rebounded nearly 20 yards away by the holy golden barrier. On the other hand, staring intently at McCrae, Mary, who was also a priest of the holy word, muttered silently, "Humph, even the holy repel was used up. Let's see what you're going to do now." Holy repel was also known as the second life of the holy word priest. It could ignore all the super armor effects of the target and force it back. Unless it was an emergency, the priest wouldn't easily release this skill because the cooldown time of this skill was too long. After hearing Mary's complaints, Mark said solemnly, "Put away your ridiculous competitive heart. This McCrae is much stronger than what we imagined or even saw." After hearing that, Mary replied noncommittally, "It's the same class. Although I don't know his strange footwork, the skills are always the same, right? Holy Repel has been released. I don't believe he can still dodge the next attack." Just as Mary finished speaking disdainfully, Jerry exclaimed, "F***CK. Why is the boss rushing over?" Hearing Jerry's shocked and angry roar, Muse immediately looked up ahead. When he saw the scene in front of him, he instantly scolded, "Despicable. Gagagagaga," an ugly baby that kept making noise appeared in front of everyone. Muse's face darkened and he blurted out, "Oh no. It's the cursed doll. Quickly disperse." Other people might not know what skill it was, but as a warlock, Muse knew very well that this cursed doll was used by warlocks to gather monsters and divert their aggro. When everyone heard that, they immediately dispersed. But it was too late. The orc leader that was sent flying happened to enter the mocking range of the cursed doll. McCrae's aggro was immediately transferred to the cursed doll. The cursed doll pulled a long face and continued to make unpleasant sounds. Gagaga. On the head of the orc leader, a symbol of anger had appeared. It was a symbol of mockery. How could the orc leader, who was mocked, care about McCrae? He directly smiled sinisterly and quickly rushed towards the cursed doll. He waved the spear in his hand and was about to slash at the cursed doll. Blair, who was closest to the cursed doll, looked at the orc leader who was about to stick to his face and instantly turned pale. He staggered half a step back and subconsciously waved the staff in his hand. A small fireball had already flown towards the orc leader. The moment the fireball hit the orc leader, Muse roared in despair, "Stop! Idiot!" But it was too late. Bang! The fireball accurately hit the orc leader, and an insignificant number floated above its head. .38 McCrae, who was already hiding far away, smiled when he saw this scene. He muttered lightly, "It's finally my turn to watch the show." If a monster mocked by the cursed doll was attacked by a player, it would immediately transfer its aggro to the player who attacked it. This was McCrae's goal. When McCrae released the Holy Expel, he had calculated the distance between the orc leader and the crowd. He secretly released the Warlock's cursed doll skill. He forcefully pulled the people who were deliberately watching the show and holding back in the battle. The official setting for this orc leader boss was 20 level 25 players with excellent equipment to kill. Even if McCrae could use shadowless steps, a bug.level footwork, it would be very difficult. Because his current speed attribute was too low compared to this orc leader. This was a game-setting problem. There was no other way. If McCrae insisted on maintaining the flawless shadowless steps in this situation, it would consume a lot of his stamina. He had no choice but to fight head-on. However, since someone was offering him combat power, McCrae naturally didn't refuse. Looking at the chaotic scene, the corners of McCrae's mouth couldn't help but curve up again. He smiled to himself and said, "This is called having someone send pillows when you're sleepy." Chapter 52. Ignore Virtue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 52. Ignore Virtue. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Chapter 52. Ignore Virtue. On the narrow mountainside. The fierce orc leader chased the angry crowd and slashed everywhere. The scene was very chaotic. Everyone had already understood the use of the cursed doll from Muse's explanation. So, amidst the rumbling iron hooves of the orc leader, there were occasional screams and curses from everyone. Despicable McCrae. You actually launched a sneak attack. You don't have honor. Damn you, McCrae. When I get out, I'll fight you to the death. Although everyone was cursing, their footsteps did not slow down at all. Behind them was an orc leader with a spear who was shouting about killing them. McCrae, who was hiding behind a big tree in the distance, felt an inexplicable sense of comfort when he saw the sorry state of everyone. He wished he could take some more melon seeds and eat them while watching. McCrae said leisurely, "Hey, Mark, run faster. Isn't your agility attribute quite high? Why are you running so slowly?" Mark, who was busy dodging the attacks of the orc leader, almost vomited blood when he heard McCrae's words. After being furious, Mark narrowed his eyes and continued to run quickly. He hatefully looked at McCrae, who was hiding in the distance. For a moment, his heart was a little conflicted. Maybe this person knew from the start that we were all spies. This person was not simple. McCrae didn't care how pathetic everyone was at this moment. He continued to leisurely name them one by one. "Hey, that mage, right, I'm talking about you. Can your shadow curse be more accurate? Are you releasing fireworks? Hey, how do you play as a warlock? Don't you know how to release the shadow curse? Warrior, quickly replenish your position. Io, can't you just use heroic strike to block the boss charge? Forget it. Stop playing this game. Lie on the ground and die." In the room, Jack stared at McCrae in shock. As he leisurely and relaxedly switched on the team voice chat and teased his teammates without restraint, he even took 2 sips of milk from time to time. This scene made Jack a little confused. He couldn't help but ask, "How did you do that? Aren't you afraid that they'll directly die?" This scene was too strange. A bunch of spies who wanted to go easy were fighting the boss with all their might at this moment, and the main character, McCrae, was actually watching a show and teasing them while drinking milk. Jack really wanted to pry open McCrae's head and see what schemes were contained inside. McCrae took a big sip of milk and switched off the team voice message. He said slowly, "I'm not afraid. I also expected them to fall into my trap." McCrae replied vaguely and switched on the team voice chat again, continuing to greet his cute teammates affectionately. "I say, aren't you guys pretty good? No one has died yet. Alright, there's no need to unload the game. Continue playing." McCrae looked at the people who were running around and attacking the boss behind them from time to time, his eyes filled with coldness. What a joke. These small forces wanted to scheme against McCrae. Although McCrae didn't like conspiracy fights in his previous life, he had seen similar things. Having been targeted by the 4 big guilds for a long time, he was already familiar with such low-level schemes. From the moment these forces began to send spies, they were destined to fail. These spies originally wanted to deliberately go easy on McCrae's mission and use the boss to kill him. It was a beautiful thought, but McCrae was not a blockhead. This boss was not raised by anyone. In terms of aggro control, this group of people was far from being comparable to McCrae. This move of aggro transfer achieved 3 goals. Firstly, they forcefully dragged these spies into the battlefield. In order to protect their levels and equipment, they had no choice but to face the boss directly and use the elites of these forces to deplete the boss' health. Secondly, using the boss to kill a few spies, the level deducted from death would also weaken the strength of these forces. In the end, McCrae was simply displeased that someone had plotted against him. He used this method to teach these arrogant spies a lesson. The chaotic scene didn't last long. Before long, there was a reduction in numbers. In a moment of carelessness, Ron made a mistake in his positioning and was immediately killed by the orc leader with a second stage sweep. Ron's death made the already serious situation worse. The remaining 8 people could no longer form a perfect defensive line to stop the fierce orc leader. Knight Jace, who was at the front, raised his round shield and dodged left and right. He hurriedly shouted, "Priest! Heal! Heal! I can't hold on anymore." Meanwhile, Mary, who was standing at the back, was already in a mess. She roared impatiently, "If King want to heal too. These 3 people in the front row are like they're bleeding profusely. I can't even heal them back with a healing crit. F***ck." Hearing Mary's angry roar, Jace, Barton, and Jerry, who were at the front, were also helpless. Our tankiness is considered first-rate among all the players, but so what if the number 1 tank of the Divine Realm comes? If anyone could withstand the 2 attacks of this orc in front of them, they could abandon all this equipment. However, before they could continue to complain, the orc leader's body glowed red again. Mark thought to himself. Not good. It's charge. The charging animation was completed almost instantly. The orc leader waved the spear in his hand and shouted loudly, running towards Blair, who he had locked onto. Another insta-kill. Blair, who was locked on by the charge, had a huge change in expression. He hurriedly shouted, "Priest! Retreat! Retreat!" Mary, who was called out again, shouted in frustration, "I'm not a hacker. I have cooldowns, okay." Chapter 53. Switching Weapons. Lubbock Sword, Equipment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 53. Switching Weapons. Lubbock Sword, Equipment. Chapter 53. Switching Weapons. Lubbock Sword, Equipment. The moment Blair was locked on by charge, his outcome was already destined. Without the holy repel of the holy word priest, no one present had any other skills to block the orc leader in the super armor state. Blair even gave up on running. He raised his staff and roared angrily, "No!" Then, he was knocked into the air by the unusually fierce orc. His HP immediately emptied, and his avatar turned gray. Instant kill. Another insta-kill. Without waiting for anyone to react, the orc leader raised the spear in its hand again. The skill, second stage sweep, was already activated. He slashed at Charles and Muse, who were too late to dodge. When Mary saw this, she hurriedly raised the scepter in her hand. The secondary healing spell that had just recovered CD had already been used. A light green recovery halo instantly appeared on Muse's body. However, everything was useless. The damage of the orc leader was too high. The damage of the skill, second stage sweep, had long overflowed. The recovery speed of a second stage healing spell was simply not enough. Charles, Muse, dead. He killed 4 people in a row. This was the terror of a level 25 silver boss. The tyrannical strength of the Orc Lord cast a thick shadow on the hearts of everyone present. Taking advantage of the time when the Orc Lord released his skill, Barton hurriedly drank a mouthful of low-level recovery potion and raised his nearly bottomless health slightly. At the side, Jace smiled bitterly and said, "What's the point of drinking recovery potions? These are 50 copper coins. Since we're going to die anyway, we might as well save 50 copper coins." Barton couldn't help but be stunned when he heard that. He scolded, "F***ck, I lost another 50 copper coins." In the early stages of the server, 50 copper coins was still very expensive, much less for the 2 unaffiliated players. It was almost half a day's income. The 2 of them looked at each other and smiled, but each of them looked embarrassed. Without waiting for everyone to continue resupplying, the orc leader had already turned around and continued to roar with a sinister smile, "Weak humans, tremble under the feet of my great orc feet. I want to drink your blood." Looking at the boss that was about to charge at them again, Jerry raised the long sword in his hand resentfully and muttered, "Drink, drink. Just don't make me drop my bronze longsword." This was something he had obtained from a bronze boss with great difficulty. It was very precious. On the side, Mark looked faintly at McCrae, who was hiding in the distance. Then, he shouted softly at Jerry, "Don't be so useless. Maybe there's still a chance." Jerry immediately recovered. But boss, without waiting for Jerry to finish, the centaur leader attacked again. From the looks of it, they can't hold on anymore. Looking at the situation, McCrae's eyes flashed slightly as he muttered to himself. Seeing that the situation was in a stalemate, especially with 3 and 4 spies killed, McCrae did not intend to continue watching with folded arms. Just as the orc leader's iron hooves were about to step on Barton, McCrae's figure suddenly appeared in front of him. The few of them were slightly stunned. Wasn't McCrae hiding far away? No one had seen him move. Why had he suddenly appeared there? The few of them looked towards the tree and suddenly realized that there was also a McCrae. Muse, who had already died in battle, was secretly shocked. Why did a priest like him know the warlock's substitute puppet skill? At this moment, he was suddenly stunned. Why would a priest have a cursed doll skill? Just as Muse was pondering over this matter, the battle on the field had already begun. At the critical moment, McCrae quickly raised his scepter and immediately released a skill at the orc leader. Holy Word Repel. The huge body of the orc leader was immediately sent flying into the air. Then, McCrae half-squatted and said calmly to Barton behind him, "Stay away." The next second, before Barton could react, McCrae had already rushed towards the orc. This familiar scene made Mark's pupils suddenly contract. Could it be? Was McCrae going to recreate that strange footwork again? It was impossible. The speed of this boss was much faster than that half-orc elf. He had no time to dodge the monster's vision. Just as Mark was filled with doubt, the 2 figures in the field were rapidly approaching. In an instant, the distance between the 2 was less than 10 yards. McCrae was almost about to touch the spear in the orc leader's hand. At this moment, McCrae's head leaned down a little. His whole body shrank and continued to approach the orc leader. Jerry stood up and exclaimed, "What is he doing?" Mark's face was full of questions. According to his previous experience, McCrae needed to maintain a certain distance from the target when using that magical footwork. 10 yards was already dangerous enough. Why did he advance instead of retreating? What was he trying to do? This was the question in everyone's hearts. Just as he was about to close in on the orc leader, McCrae raised the beginner's scepter in his hand and released a holy curse on the orc leader. As a priest, when he saw McCrae's strange move, he laughed so hard that he fell to the ground. He shouted, a priest rushed to the front just to release a debuff buff for the monster. Ha ha ha, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to die from laughter. Ignoring Mary, even the players who were not priests were speechless at this stupid move. Had McCrae given up on his own accord? However, the next scene stunned all the players present. They were all in disbelief. Switch weapons. Lubbock sword, equipment. With a light snort, the beginner's scepter in his hand disappeared. Whoosh! In the next moment, a long sword glowing with silvery white light appeared in McCrae's hand. Chapter 54. Why can his priest use a sword? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 54. Why can his priest use a sword? Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Chapter 54. Why can his priest use a sword? At the scene. McCrae was wearing a black robe, and his hand was holding a sharp sword. His whole body had almost stuck to the huge body of the orc leader. Behind the two of them, everyone was stunned. Mary, who was also a priest, cried out in surprise, why can his priest use a sword? Mark's blue eyes were filled with surprise and excitement. He muttered, a priest who can use a sword. Interesting. I wonder what magical hidden occupation it is. As for Barton, who was saved by McCrae, he was even more shocked. He looked at the sword in McCrae's hand in a daze and didn't know what to say for a moment. Musi, who was already dead, was no longer surprised, but completely shocked. It was fine if a priest knew a warlock's skill, although it was a little strange. However, priests and warlocks belonged to the mage class. McCrae might have had a special way to learn the cursed doll skill. But how did this priest explain taking out a sword? Battle cleric. Was there such a character class? This was too exaggerated. Apart from being shocked, everyone hurriedly switched on the recording function. They wanted to record the scene. A priest using a sword. Could it be that there was a bug in Divine Domain? Then he looked at McCrae. After switching to the Lubbock sword, McCrae's aura instantly became sharp. He no longer had his usual lazy appearance, as if he was a sharp sword. Sword occupations were the first ones that McCrae had mastered in his previous life. They were also his favorite and best. Just as everyone was still in shock, the orc leaders and McCrae, who were almost together, attacked. Cripple strike. McCrae snorted coldly, dragged the silver white Lubbock sword in his hand, and stabbed at the orc leader's weak point at a strange and tricky angle, the leg joint. Whoosh! The sound of a sword piercing the air sounded. Just as the orc leader's attack was about to hit McCrae, the sword in McCrae's hand stabbed the ferocious orc leader. A shocking scene happened. Unlike what they imagined, McCrae was not instantly killed by the huge orc leader. Instead, after being stabbed, the rapidly advancing orc leader directly stopped. It stopped for nearly a full second. How was that possible? This thought appeared in the hearts of the players. Then, a system prompt message appeared in the chat box of the team. System. Player McCrae uses the skill Cripple Strike on the orc leader. Completion rate is 100%. It will cause the orc leader to be stunned for a second and cause cripple. Cripple effect lasts for 3 minutes. Everyone who saw the system message was stunned again. Stun for a second. 3 minutes of crippling effect. Was this really an attack special effect caused by a crippling strike? They had never seen it before. Mark turned back to look at Jerry and asked in disbelief, a warrior's cripple strike has such an effect. What Mark asked was not only what he wanted to know, but also what everyone present wanted to know. They had seen many warriors crippling strike, but they had never seen such an effect. How did McCrae do it? At this moment, Jerry's mind was filled with thoughts. Unlike other people's simple doubts, as a warrior, Jerry had long been completely conquered by McCrae's crippling blow. Jerry changed his usual arrogant posture, drooped his head, and slowly said, "Crippling strike, in theory, can indeed cause such an attack effect." Mark hurriedly asked, "Why didn't you have such an exaggerated effect when you used it?" Jerry looked at the scene in a daze and continued to fight with the orc leader. He said word by word, "Crippling strike does have the effect of stunting, but right now, in the entire divine realm, probably only this McCrae can do it." Jerry took a look at the doubtful faces and shook his head helplessly. He continued to say with a bitter smile, "It's very difficult to produce a stun effect with a cripple strike. It has strict requirements on the attack point and attack time. See that 100% completion rate. The highest I did was 51%. Everyone was in an uproar. Jerry was a proud man who thought that his operation was top-notch, but today, McCrae used his strength to tell him what was meant by "there's always someone better." On the other hand, the half-orc leader, who was unusually fierce in front of everyone, couldn't even touch the corner of McCrae's shirt at this moment. Everyone exclaimed, "That strange footwork again." The orc leader in the field kept walking in a circle. The angry boss kept roaring and waving the terrifying spear in its hand. But it was all useless. McCrae's shadowless steps used the blind spot of the monster's vision in divine domain. It was the basic logic of the monster's data. It was impossible to break through. Unless the monster's agility exceeded a certain value of McCrae, it was impossible to touch him. McCrae's crippling strike's effect was to reduce the agility of the orc leader. Just as everyone thought that this boss would be tortured to death by McCrae like an orc elite. McCrae, who was constantly dodging the orc leader, suddenly said, "Be careful." Everyone was confused. What? McCrae stopped dodging. He quickly raised the Lubbock sword and used an uppercut to send the orc's huge body flying 5 yards in the air. The floating orc leader suddenly began to glow with a layer of blood-red light, and suddenly roared into the sky. Everyone had seen such a description on the official website. Everyone exclaimed, F***ck enraged. Chapter 55. Boss Enraged. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 55. Boss Enraged. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. When its health points dropped to 10%, the boss health bar would turn red. A boss with red health would go berserk. This was the characteristic of a boss-level monster in Divine Domain. However, the HP of the orc leader in front of him was clearly still 40%. It had yet to enter a red HP state, so how could it enter a berserk state? As a group of elite players, they clearly knew what the boss enraged state meant, especially this level 25 silver boss. Once the orcs entered a berserk state, they had no choice but to escape. As Mark retreated, he used another speed scroll on himself. Then, he slowly said, "If I remember correctly, low health isn't the only condition to go berserk." Everyone's expressions changed. That's right, they had indeed seen in the official database that apart from the low health state, bosses' creatures also had other ways to trigger the boss enrage. Enraged meant increasing the boss attributes and even skills. It could increase the difficulty of killing the boss, and the complexity of the boss would increase. Jace hurriedly opened the official database and entered the conditions for the orc leader to go berserk. When Jace saw the answer, he blurted out, consecutively dodged at 50. Everyone immediately understood why the orcs without red blood would suddenly go berserk. But it was too late to notice this. From the moment the orcs began to glow with blood light and roar, it was already too late. Rumble. Boom. Boom. Following a series of loud sounds, everyone felt the entire ground begin to shake violently. On the originally flat ground, old tombstones and sarcophagi began to appear out of nowhere, as if they were carrying out a mysterious recovery ritual. McCrae knew that this was the berserk skill of the orc leader, which summoned the elite souls of the orcs. The number of players summoned was based on the number of players within the range of the orc leader's aggro. Apart from the 4 people who died in battle, there were a total of 6 players on the field. In other words, the orc leader would summon 6 orc elite souls. At the scene, the orc leader, whose whole body was glowing with blood, continued to roar loudly. With his roar, 6 orc elite souls emerged from under the tombstones and stone coffins. A total of 6. McCrae switched the Lubbock sword in his hand to a new staff and shouted at the panicked crowd, "Retreat. Maintain the formation. Cover the back." The undead army summoned by the orc leader would not inherit the hatred of the orc leader. All players within their aggro range would be attacked. The elite orc undead summoned did not have the high attributes of ordinary orcs, but their levels were high, and like the leader of the orcs, they were level 25. Under the level suppression, the damage to everyone was no lower than normal orc elites. Everyone's expression became very serious. In addition, the 4 spies had been killed by the orc leader. The rest of the people listened to McCrae's command and quickly formed a defensive formation and began to retreat. McCrae looked at the 7 monsters in the field, his calm face still calm. There was a time limit for the elite orc souls summoned. 20 minutes. As long as they could survive these 20 minutes, the souls of the orc elite would automatically dissipate. Killing the orc leader was naturally nothing difficult. Thinking to this point, McCrae no longer hesitated. Immediately, surrounded by 7 orcs, he threw a cursed doll. Gagagagaga, the ugly baby immediately let out a strange cry, but at that moment, everyone felt that there was no other pleasant voice. Under the taunt of the cursed doll, the 7 orcs gathered at the center of the field. Now. Lava cage. McCrae shouted softly and quickly raised the staff in his hand, aimed at the orc gathering point, and released the elementalist skill. The damage of the lava cage wasn't high, but it was a very useful group deceleration skill. It would also give the target a continuous burn debuff. It's not over yet. After releasing the lava cage, McCrae muttered, picked up his staff, and continued casting. Bite of Frost. Goblin Trap. Corpse Swamp. Wild Bind. Holy Prison. Everyone present looked at McCrae, who was constantly releasing control skills. From the initial surprise, to doubt, and finally to shock, they had already become numb. They silently admired McCrae's skillful fireworks performance. 20 minutes wasn't short, but in everyone's eyes, it was indeed a short time. In these 20 minutes, apart from drinking a few magic recovery potions, McCrae had been continuously releasing restrictive skills the rest of the time. They were even group skills, and not a single skill was repeated. In their hearts, McCrae's identity had changed many times. From the initial harmless priest to the priest who could release warlock skills later on. After they accepted that McCrae was a priest and a warlock, the Lubbock sword in his hand broke their imagination again. This was a battle priest who could use a sword in close combat. But now, McCrae had gone from a ridiculous battle priest to an invincible magic god who knew all magic skills. They gradually understood why McCrae could become a dungeon killer and why he could crush an expert-level solo dungeon. Because McCrae was not alone. He was an entire team by himself. Chapter 56. 20 Skills, Pure Hand Speed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 56. 20 Skills, Pure Hand Speed. 20 minutes passed. The 6 orc elite souls that were summoned slowly turned into broken shadows and disappeared in the air amid a series of wails. Only the orc leader was left, struggling desperately among the many restrictive skills. Stunned. Everyone was stunned. For an entire 20 minutes, there was no repeat skill. Was this something a player could do? This was simply invincible. This is, game bug. F***ck, this must be a game bug. Otherwise, how could players have so many class skills? And did you notice? These skills seem to be from different magic classes. F***ck, that Lava Cage is an Elementalist's group restriction skill. Corpse Swamp is a Dark Curse Master skill. I've never heard of this Goblin Trap. Tell me a joke. This is a fair game. It can't be a bug. Divine Domain server is the most advanced smart.brain server in the world. This only means that God McCrae has some special item. Everyone started discussing. The shock that McCrae had given them was just too shocking. However, Jack was the most shocked one in the room. As everyone knew, there were only 10 places in Divine Domain's personal interface where skills could be placed. From level 20 to above, every level up meant 5 additional hotkey slots, up to 30. The skill in the hotkeys column would be directly chosen for the user to draw it to the position where it was released. Then, the casting could be completed. However, there were far more than 30 skills in each class. Together with some common skills, the number of skills a high-level player had was usually around 150. However, the hotkey slots would never be enough. So, some skills needed to be remembered by remembering the combination of them. The combo of buttons needed to be hit on the keyboard, and then the target selected by the mouse had to be aimed before it was released. This was a lot more time and much more complicated than casting skills quickly. Therefore, everyone placed some key and necessary skills in the hotkey column to facilitate their operation. But Jack saw that there was only one skill in McCrae's fast spell column, Quick Recover, a general evasion skill. None of the other skills were placed. The skills that McCrae released were completely dependent on his hands. More than 20 skills. Jack subconsciously wiped his forehead. It was covered in cold sweat. He was already muttering in his heart. Is this guy really a human? The scene of McCrae's operation on his hands during these 20 minutes still flashed in Jack's mind. That it was a harmonious and strange scene. A pair of clean and long hands worked perfectly together on the keyboard and mouse. They were like two butterflies dancing on the keyboard and mouse. McCrae's rapid tapping even made Jack see after images. It was so fast that Jack looked at McCrae's rapidly moving hand as if it was moving slowly. This was an extremely fast performance. However, there was absolutely no pressure on McCrae's expression just now. In other words, this hand speed wasn't McCrae's limit. Jack was silent. He didn't know why this friend in front of him knew so much about Divine Domain. Then, he looked at the game. McCrae switched the beginner's scepter in his hand to the silver-white Lubbock sword. This confused everyone present. In front of everyone. Jerry scratched his head and asked in confusion, can't we just use a magic skill to kill it from a distance? Why go through the trouble of rushing up to melee? On the other hand, Mary echoed, that's right. McCrae's class is so insane. He knows all the skills of all the classes. It's like a bug. He's invincible. At this moment, Mark also slowly woke up from his shock and slowly said, don't think about other people's occupations. It should be some special unique occupation. Mary muttered indignantly, TCH, isn't it just luck? Such a heaven-defying occupation, even I can do it. Mark asked seriously, oh. He can only use the priest's skill to kill an orc elite alone. You mean you can do it too? Mark knew his brother too well. His game talent was extremely high, but this also led to him being too proud. Now, such a heaven-defying character had appeared. He had used the same class, the same skill, and even worse equipment than him to do what he couldn't. His pride had suffered a setback. Mark shook his head, thinking to himself. This is good. It prevents him from being arrogant. I'll be at a disadvantage sooner or later. Jerry didn't say anything. McRae's 100% completion rate cripple strike was enough for him to learn for a while. The two unaffiliated knights were extremely shocked. He had long forgotten about McRae using the cursed doll to get rid of the hatred in his heart. Looking at McRae. At this moment, the orc leader boss had already become low health, but the boss that had just been enraged had a fragile period. McRae unleashed another crippling attack on the orc leader, slowing it down. The attributes of the orc leaders in their weak stages would decrease. In addition to the beneficial effect of the crippling strike, their agility attributes were almost half of their normal attributes. McRae didn't even need to use a vision dodging technique. He could completely rely on his body's reflexes to perfectly dodge the orc leader's lance attack. Under McRae's constant consumption, the HP of the orc leader became lower and lower. Chapter 57. Congratulations on clearing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 57. Congratulations on clearing. Damn humans. With a roar, the orc's huge body fell heavily to the ground. Then, a crisp system prompt sounded. System. Congratulations on clearing, orc territory, expert difficulty. The teleportation array to leave the dungeon will be opened in 10 seconds. Following the system prompt, McRae kicked the 4 dead people out of the team without hesitation. System. Player Muse was kicked out of the team by Team Captain McRae. System. Player Blair was kicked out of the team by Team Leader McRae. System. Player Ron was kicked out of the team by Team Captain McRae. System. Player Charles was kicked out of the team by Team Leader McRae. Determined and decisive, never sloppy. When the messages from these 4 teams appeared in the chat box of the team, Jerry and Mary both looked at Mark. Mark didn't respond at all and just looked at McRae in the distance. McRae looked at Mark meaningfully but didn't say anything. The meaning in McRae's eyes was obvious. If you want to get the reward, stay put. The two of them had a tacit understanding. Barton and Jace, the 2 unaffiliated people, didn't understand. The 2 of them asked in confusion, "Captain, why are you kicking these 4 out? Isn't this unethical?" After saying that, Barton and Jace felt a little embarrassed. Forget about kicking these 4 people, even if McRae kicked them all, they had nothing to say. In this dungeon, the 9 of them were almost useless, and they had even gotten a lot of experience points for free. He still wanted to split the equipment now. He was indeed a little thick-skinned. However, out of curiosity, he still asked. McRae didn't answer. He just said lightly to Mark, "Everyone, you've worked hard." This time, if Mark still didn't understand that he had exposed himself, then he shouldn't play games. He immediately replied with everyone, "No, not at all, not at all. Be reasonable." This boss was basically fought by McRae alone. It wasn't hard on them, so it could be said that they were sincere. But this assassination mission didn't seem like it could be completed. McRae continued, "So what's next?" Everyone was somewhat confused as they asked in confusion, "Next?" McRae slowly walked to the corpse of the orc leader, squatted down, and said with a smile, "Stay or leave. You have to consider it carefully." Jerry and Mary were stunned and looked at Mark in a daze. Mark patted Jerry and Mary beside him, then glanced at McRae and said lightly, "Leave the team." System. Player Mark, quit the team. With the system prompt, Mark's figure gradually disappeared from the dungeon. McRae's voice sounded faintly again. "Your boss has left, why aren't the 2 of you leaving?" Jerry and Mary were instantly embarrassed. They laughed dryly and immediately left the team without replying. System. Players Jerry, Mary, quit the team. Now, only McRae, Barton, and Jace were left in the dungeon. Barton and Jace looked at each other. Both of them felt like they were sitting on pins and needles. He hurriedly said to McRae, Captain, we're convinced of your strength. We'll stay and join the guild. If all of them quit, we wouldn't. Not to mention the benefits of joining a guild, just farming dungeons with God McCrae was enough. The nervousness on their faces amused McCrae. He immediately had the intention of pulling a prank on them. He deliberately put on a serious face and asked, "What can the two of you do for the guild?" Upon hearing McCrae's question, the two of them hurriedly expressed their loyalty to him. Barton shouted, "The guild is my house. I love my house." When Jace heard this, he was disgusted and scolded Barton for being mushy. Then, he shouted, "From today onwards, I'm yours." McCrae smiled at the two of them and nodded, not taking it seriously. As a core member, this loyalty was definitely not enough, but at the moment, joining a guild was not a problem. "Yo, my luck's not bad." McCrae took out a simple black spear from under the corpse of the orc leader. It was the spear in the orc leader's hand. Beast Leader Spear. Silver.grade, unidentified, silver.grade again. And if nothing went wrong, it was a level 25 silver.grade item, just like the leader of the orcs. McCrae picked up the unidentified orc spear, feeling a little excited. Then, McCrae raised the spear in his left hand, and his right hand lit up with a white glow. He slowly wiped the spear. After the light in McCrae's hand wiped the originally dim orc lance, it immediately erupted with its own profound luster. This was the appraisal skill that he had spent 20 silver coins on at the blacksmith shop. It had come into use. The appraised orc lance also revealed a terrifying attribute. Orc Leader's Spear, type. Spear level. Level 25 quality. Silver attributes. Strength plus 150, Constitution plus 50, Intelligence plus 30, special effect. When attacking a target, there is a 15% chance of causing serious damage. Normal attacks add 80% strength damage to the user. Description: kill. Kill them all. Hahaha, SSS. When McCrae pasted the attributes of the orc leader's spear on the team channel, Barton and Jace immediately gasped. Based on its attributes alone, this orc lord spear was already an invincible existence. The weapon actually had as much as 150 points of strength. This was too ridiculous. After all of their equipment together only had 80 to 90 strength points. The current top warrior players only had 70 to 80 strength attributes. If this spear appeared in the market, everyone would probably go crazy. Barton and Jace looked at the simple spear in McCrae's hand and swallowed silently. However, they knew very well that this weapon had nothing to do with them. Even if McCrae gave it to them, they wouldn't dare to accept it. The value of this weapon was too precious. Chapter 58. Shocking. Was it a skill or a bug? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 58. Shocking. Was it a skill or a bug? Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Chapter 58. Shocking. Was it a skill or a bug? McCrae and the other two quickly cleaned the battlefield. Then, he bid farewell to the two of them, walked into the teleportation array, and left the orc territory. He was transported to the outskirts of Gunnis City. At this point, the siege plans of the various forces had completely fallen through. At the same time, on the official forum of the Divine Domain, the views of a few videos began to increase rapidly. Shocking. Is it a technique or a bug? God McCrae's strange movement technique. External. Priest. Warrior. Or mage. Let's explore the mystery of McCrae's real class. Let God McCrae tell you what a real rogue is. Open the trap and eliminate it together. A few videos immediately caused a stir when they were uploaded. Wanjing City. On the desk of an advertising company, Katie secretly opened the forum of Divine Domain. This was the happiest time of her day. Nothing happened, so she could see what happened to the game she liked. As usual, when Katie opened the latest trending segment, she was instantly shocked. She wondered to herself, why is it all this McRae? He had heard of McRae's reputation. Apparently, he was some kind of dungeon killer. However, because they weren't in the same big area, Katie didn't pay much attention to McRae. After all, their big area also had a very powerful dungeon team. In Katie's eyes, he was just another gold coin warrior that the large financial group had spent money on. With a doubtful attitude, Katie opened the most popular video. Shocking. Is it a technique or a bug? God, McRae's strange movement technique. As the scene played, the scene of McRae holding a new wand and constantly dodging the orc elite appeared in front of Katie's eyes. F***CK. This works too. This is something a human can do. Katie was shocked. This wasn't right. In his heart, McRae should be a rich second-generation heir who relied on gold coins to smash equipment and equipment attributes to crush dungeons. However, anyone who had played Divine Domain before could tell that the weapon in McRae's hand was only a level 0 novice scepter. This thing could also be used to kill elite monsters. And it was even a level 15 elite monster. In the scene, McRae was walking leisurely. Facing a level 15 orc elite, it was as easy as walking a dog. For the first time, Katie began to wonder if she and McRae were playing a different game. After this video was played, Katie quickly opened the next video. When Katie saw McRae constantly releasing skills of different classes, her mind was filled with shock. She didn't understand what McRae's class was. He had seen hidden occupations before, but there wasn't such a crazy hidden occupation, right? At the same time, there were many others like Katie. His elegant movement technique was like a magic machine gun casting spells, the switching of different weapons, and the precise elimination of traps. The word invincible slowly appeared in the hearts of the gamers. The moment the video was posted, McRae's recruitment post was pushed up again. Instantly, players sent applications to join the chat group. Of course, some were happy, while others were troubled. Fire group. George was the only one in the large conference room. George took out his satellite phone and quickly dialed a number. Do. After a short pause, the call connected. George asked in a low voice, "Is the mission completed?" There was a pause on the other end of the phone, and then a clear voice sounded. Fail. George frowned and snorted. I need an explanation. This time, the other party didn't stop and replied directly, there's no reason. The mission failed. I'll return the deposit. Goodbye. George suddenly pressed the cigar in his hand on the table and said angrily, trash. However, what answered him was the busy tone of the phone being hung up. Beep, 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 George angrily threw the phone aside. After a moment, he pressed a button on the table and a walkie-talkie appeared. George said angrily into the walkie-talkie, prepare for action. In a basement in Longhai City. 3 young people were sitting in front of the computer, eating instant noodles. It was Mark, Jerry, and Mary. Jerry picked up the bowl and took a sip of the soup. He looked at Mark and whispered, "Boss, this George is our big boss. Are we sure we don't want to continue working with him?" Mary chimed in. "That's right, boss. Let's continue working with him." Mark buried his head in his bowl of instant noodles and replied indifferently, "Why don't the 2 of you be the boss?" The moment that was said, Jerry and Mary immediately put down the instant noodles in their hands and hurriedly waved at Mary. "Boss, are you kidding? We didn't mean that." The 2 of them laughed awkwardly. They had no intention of being the boss. To them, Mark was their only boss. Jerry picked up the instant noodles again and asked carefully, "Boss, what are we going to do next? Are we going to farm gold coins again?" To him and Mary, it didn't matter if they continued to work with George, but they had to have other sources of income. How could Mark not know what these two were thinking? He quietly finished the last mouthful of instant noodles, put down the bowl, and said, I'm preparing to join the guild, McRae's guild. With that, regardless of the shocked Jerry and Mary, they turned around and entered the game, sending McRae a friend request. Chapter 59. Kazan's Shadow Bow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 59. Kazan's Shadow Bow. In Gunna City, the number of players gradually increased. People came and went on the wide street, making it seem less empty. McRae was wearing a signature black robe and walking straight to the archer mentor Kazan. The mission status in the mission column had been updated. System. The test of Kazan, expert difficulty, has been completed. Evaluation. S+ elite orc kills. 50/50 number of orc leaders killed. 1/1. It's actually an S+ score. I wonder what special reward it will be. After taking a look at the mission completion situation, McRae asked curiously. Then. McRae quickly walked in front of the archery hall and found Mentor Kazan. McRae quickly submitted the mission. Kazan, who was like an iceberg for 10,000 years, actually had a slightly shocked expression on his face. He said in surprise, seems like I've underestimated you. The NPCs in the Divine Domain were very intelligent. Sometimes, when the players used different words and tones for the same missions, the NPCs would make different decisions or rewards. McRae naturally knew this very well. McRae smiled and replied calmly, You're joking. It was just luck. Kazan stood up straight and nodded silently at McRae in approval. He continued, Luck is also a form of strength. Modest adventurer, I thank you on behalf of the dead people of Gunna City. With that, Kazan actually bent slightly and made a standard archery gesture at McRae. After all, Kazan's status was higher than that of ordinary barons. McRae hurriedly returned the greeting and said respectfully, Kind Lord Kazan, you are too polite. After finishing her gesture, the coldness on Kazan's face decreased greatly. She stretched out her hands, and instantly, a beautiful purple bow appeared in her hands. McRae was shocked. This was it. Kazan's Shadow Bow. Completing the last fusion weapon of Elementary Limitless. Kazan's hands slowly brushed across the purple longbow, as if she was touching her child. Her eyes were filled with reminiscence. She slowly said, This bow is called the Shadow Bow. It accompanied me through those unforgettable years as a trainee archer. With that, Kazan solemnly handed the longbow to McRae and said slowly, Now, she's yours. Don't let her light be blinded. McRae caught the longbow Kazan handed over with both hands and replied respectfully, Honorable Kazan, thank you for your reward. I will definitely let her regain her former glory. Kazan nodded in satisfaction and continued, I still have a pair of boots that I've collected for a long time. I'll give them to you as well. I hope you can become an excellent archer soon. McRae was delighted. It's here. As expected, there was an additional mission reward for the S+ score. What kind of reward would that be? Kazan turned around and took out a pair of exquisite silver-white boots from a golden box behind him. He handed them to McRae. After replying politely, McRae began to check the attributes of the boots. Wind-chasing boots type. Boots level. Level 25 quality. Gold attributes. Physical resistance +30, magic resistance +30, agility +120, special effect. Chasing the wind. After release, it can increase movement speed by 20% and reduce weight by 30%. Duration. 2 minutes, CD time. 10 minutes. Introduction. Wind. Take me away. A boot left behind by a young man who likes to chase the wind. It was actually a gold grade. Apart from a full 30 points of magic resistance enhancement, there was also a 120 points of movement speed enhancement. It was the number one equipment in the divine domain. Even the value of the orc leader's spear was far inferior to this wind-chasing boots. Gold.grade. Before this bronze.grade weapon became widespread, the attributes of gold.grade weapons were like late.stage god.grade weapons. They were invincible. McCrae quickly put the wind-chasing boots into his backpack, thanked the archer mentor Kazan, and said goodbye, then turned and left the archer hall. He took a look at the time. It was already 9 in the evening. McCrae couldn't wait to synthesize Limitless anymore. It was the first divine weapon that belonged to him. McCrae took out the everlasting manufacturing blueprint from his backpack. Blue, white crystal, unique, 1/1 Carl's Rip Rifle 1/1 Rager's Scepter 1/1 Kazan's Shadow Bow 1/1 Red Crystal 20/20 White Crystal 20/20 Yellow Crystal 20/20 Black Crystal 20/20 all gathered. McCrae clenched his fists. In his previous life, he had missed Limitless because he lacked the unique material, the blue-white heaven crystal. Although McCrae had later collected divine weapons of various types, Limitless had always been a knot in his heart. After all, switching weapons had a cooldown time. He instinctively released skills of different classes as he pleased. It made McCrae feel like he had a treasure mountain, but he could only spend a little each time. In many cases, McCrae only needed to switch weapons and use the skills of a certain class to easily resolve the crisis. However, it was precisely because of the cooldown time for switching weapons that he had to use relatively dangerous positioning and methods to avoid the skills. Only McCrae knew the pain and troubles involved. But now, everything was in the past. Limitless, this amazing design weapon was about to be created by him. McCrae suppressed his excitement and took out the items he needed from his personal warehouse one by one and placed them in Limitless manufacturing book. System. Would you like to spend 2 gold coins to synthesize a self-made weapon? Limitless. Yes. Without hesitation, McCrae clicked confirm. He had waited for this moment for too long. The moment McCrae clicked confirm, all the fusion materials and weapon creation books flashed with a dazzling light, making it difficult to see clearly. A moment later, the dazzling light gradually dissipated. A long sword was lying quietly on the manufacturing platform. Chapter 60. Limitless, Sword Form. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 60. Limitless, Sword Form. Did it succeed? McCrae took a deep breath and gently picked up the exquisite bronze sword from the ground. The attributes of the bronze sword were immediately displayed in front of McCrae. Limitless, Sword Form Type. Long Sword Level. Level 5 Quality. Self-made Attributes. Strength plus 50, Constitution plus 40, Special Effect. Infinite Change. Weapons without CD can be switched to other forms. Current forms, sword, gun, bow. Never wear out. This weapon doesn't need repair, its durability is unlimited. Evolution. It can continuously devour new weapons and equipment to upgrade its attributes. It cannot be dropped. It cannot be traded. Introduction. McCrae's self-made weapon, SSS. Even the experienced McCrae couldn't help but gasp when he saw the attributes of Limitless, Sword Form. A level 5 longsword actually added 50 points of strength. 40 points of constitution. In comparison, the Lubbock sword that was also a longsword had lower attributes. This was the charm of a top-grade self-made weapon. According to McCrae's calculations, the current Limitless, according to attributes of the same level, could already compare to legendary level equipment. Although compared to some higher grade weapons, dark gold, epic, legendary, and highest grade mythical equipment, there were fewer additional special skills and attribute attacks. These weren't a problem. Evolution. This was the second characteristic that McCrae desired so much. Apart from changing forms, evolution was Limitless' greatest characteristic. Although Limitless didn't have any special skills now, McCrae could collect high-grade weapons with top-grade special effects and let Limitless devour and evolve. Although there was a certain chance of failure, this ability was already heaven defying. McCrae couldn't help but stroke the long sword in his hand and muttered, with Limitless, maybe I can be considered a true god of war. McCrae raised Limitless in his hand and slashed at the air. Whoosh! A dull sound of air being torn apart could be heard. McCrae casually twirled a few sword flowers to familiarize himself with Limitless' feeling. Perfect. This was McCrae's evaluation of Limitless. Looking at Limitless in his hand, his eyes turned fierce and he shouted softly, change form. Limitless, gun. Whoosh! With a soft sound, the long sword in McCrae's hand was immediately enveloped by light. In the next moment, a similarly bronze flintlock weapon appeared in his hand. Limitless, gun form, type. Gun level. Level 5 quality. Self-made attributes. Strength plus 42 intelligence plus 40 shooting speed. Fast, special effect. Infinite change. Weapons without CD can be switched to other forms. Current forms, sword, gun, bow. Never wear out. This weapon doesn't need repair, its durability is unlimited. Evolution. It can continuously devour new weapons and equipment to upgrade its attributes. It cannot be dropped. It cannot be traded. Introduction. McCrae's self-made weapon, a brand new characteristic panel appeared in front of McCrae. Nice gun. McCrae exclaimed. Apart from the lack of special skills, it was simply a perfect weapon. McCrae didn't have time to use it, and directly shouted again, change form. Limitless, bow. The flintlock in his hand immediately disappeared and turned into a ball of light. In the next moment, a bronze longbow immediately appeared in McCrae's hand. McCrae clicked on the attributes of the bow. Limitless, bow form type. Bow level. Level 5 quality. Self-made attributes. Strength plus 46 intelligence plus 38 shooting speed. Fast, special effect. Infinite change. Weapons without CD can be switched to other forms. Current forms, sword, gun, bow. Never wear out. This weapon doesn't need repair, its durability is unlimited. Evolution. It can continuously devour new weapons and equipment to upgrade its attributes. It cannot be dropped. It cannot be traded. Introduction. McCrae's self-made weapon, McCrae carefully weighed the bow in his hand and played with it carefully. He thought to himself, maybe I should give it a try. At this moment, McCrae's phone rang. System. Friend Barton, requesting a call. After McCrae clicked allow, Barton's anxious voice sounded. Captain. It's me. Barton. McCrae frowned. Barton sounded anxious. I know. What happened? Barton said gloomily, Jace and I are stuck in Hunter Spirit Hill. Barton and Jace had just exited the dungeon and were about to go to Hunter Spirit Hill to farm experience again, but they didn't expect to be surrounded by a group of people. However, their ultimate goal wasn't them at all, but McCrae. So he hurriedly sent a message to McCrae to remind him. McCrae replied, who's blocking you? Barton immediately replied, they said that they were from the fire group. There were more than 20 of them, and Jace had already been killed. I took the opportunity to escape, but I should be caught soon. Their goal isn't us, but you. Captain, you shouldn't leave Gunna City now. They're waiting for you. McCrae had heard of the fire group in his previous life. It was a second-rate guild, the financial group behind the Fire Guild. Its strength was considered relatively strong among the second-rate guilds. It probably hadn't established itself as a proper guild yet. McCrae pondered for a moment and looked at Limitless in his hand. He replied calmly, hide well. Hang in there for a while longer. I'll be there in a while. With that, McCrae hung up. Under the moonlight, McCrae's eyes were cold, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He muttered, I was just worried. I didn't have a suitable place to test limitless power, so someone came knocking on my door. Having made up his mind, McCrae immediately walked towards the teleportation array that led to Hunter Spirit Hill. The battle broke out at any moment.